Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John with Coffee and the Bull. We want to say thank y'all for taking a moment out of your day and watching our podcast again. We really do appreciate it. So far, we've been going up, increasing in subscribers and
Just shout Red Bull into my eye.
increasing in subscribers and views and all that wonderful stuff that we're trying to get. So before we go any further, if you get a chance, hit that subscribe, follow button, share, all that other stuff. Before we get started, John has a gift today that I brought him. It's a chocolate chip cookie sitting in milk, but it's a candle.
Yeah,
So it smells like chocolate chip cookie. So y'all may not be able to smell it, but it smells wonderful in here right now because John needs a shower. But
He's not lying.
no, but all jokes aside, guys, we're going to be talking about some stuff that's kind of dark today. So, if you're not in a good headspace, or something like that, this episode may not be for you right now.
At the same time, if you're not in a good headspace, it may be the right
It
episode
may
for
be,
you.
yeah. So, it may be worth checking out. That being said, we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about some pretty dark stuff. So if you are, a little disclaimer, like we've done several times before, if you are struggling with something, whether it's thoughts of hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, don't sit around and listen to this. Take a moment, go ahead, call 988 and get you some medical help. Those are the medical professionals, or mental health professionals.
And look, if you don't want to go that route, if you're worried about the stigmas and everything else, call a friend. If you're really worried, email us. We get it directly, and we'll gladly talk to somebody.
But there are resources out there, so don't try to take it by yourself. Don't try to go down that bridge alone. Definitely, there's always, despite feeling alone, there's always somebody who is willing to answer that call, and have that conversation with you.
And to piggyback off of that, if you find yourself in a boat where the person that you're reaching out to isn't beneficial, or maybe the way they're going about it isn't helpful, find somebody else.
Right.
Not every road is meant for you to travel.
Well, not only that, not everybody has the answers.
Fact.
A lot of people who try to help may not be able to help. Unfortunately.
Right.
So and there's not. And again, that's the purpose of having a conversation.
Right. And just a heads up for everybody watching. Because it seems to be a question we get asked every now and then when people find out. Everything we talk about is personal situations that directly involve ourselves or each other on different things. We are law enforcement, but we don't ever bring up anybody's personal situations or anything that we've dealt with there. But we bring up the fact of how those things affected us in our day-to-day lives. And so just kind of giving you guys a little heads up so we don't have to keep answering that question. This is not a cop shop talk.
We're not telling a bunch of cop stories and trying to be entertaining.
Right. This isn't Monday Night Quarterbacking anything. We don't stand on one side or the other of any of these political debates. We don't choose sides as far as cops or not cops, or law enforcement or not law enforcement, or right or wrong in that aspect. We stand behind and stand on our own values and principles and where we are in life, and how things have affected us and how we conduct ourselves based off of that. And to be fair, just to kind of address it, Mike and I had an approach to life prior to our discussion of the podcast and how we were going to go about the podcast. And we have noticed a very significant change in the way that we approach situations, not only in our day-to-day lives, but also in law enforcement, when we handle some of these higher stress situations or individuals that are having those breakdowns and going through life.
Right.
And so if anything, we're an example of how you can change not only your thought process, but the way that you approach your struggles in life. So take that for what it's worth, and understand that the premise of our podcast is just to help everybody as best that we can with our own experiences and our own life stories. And that's really all this is. This isn't anything other than that.
Right. Well, so we'll go ahead and get started. Kick it off, and just dive head first in. When I was growing up, it was not common, or at least I don't remember it being common, hearing of people who had checked out.
Right.
It happened. I had a childhood friend of mine that his dad had gone that route.
Right.
And he was being raised by his grandparents. And I think he was being raised by his grandparents. His brothers, one of his brothers was raised by the grandparents. The other brother was living with another set of grandparents. And so it destroyed the family mechanism or the family unit that he had.
Yeah.
And then he wound up, unfortunately becoming a troubled child. But outside of that, man, I don't remember hearing a lot of those instances taking place.
Well, like we talked about, it's crazy how, growing up we thought quicksand was going to be the biggest threat to life.
Right.
And it turns out it's the thoughts and desires of checking out early,
right,
or your friends and family doing it.
And so it's one of the things where over time, I guess maybe in my early 20s, I kind of had a more arrogant approach to it,
right.
Where, guys who had made that decision and decided to end their life on their own terms, I'll give them that, those were considered weak people.
Right.
And
couldn't hack it in life.
They couldn't handle it.
Right.
Oh, their dads must not have held them enough or gave them enough hugs, and
right.
so it was a very ignorant approach.
Right.
It was very arrogant, and honestly, life hadn't really kicked me in the teeth yet.
Right.
And so I think that might be the reasoning for it.
And I'm right there with you. I felt the same way about it. Most of my life was that's a coward's way out.
Right.
That's you're a weak individual. You can't hack it if that's your approach is to just lose the war and check out. But like over time, when you deal with it so much, and granted, we are exposed to it a lot more than the average person.
Right.
But we walk into it and you've got to lock your stomach up. You've got to try to keep your wits about you through the circumstances, and then you've got to go home and act like you didn't just see some gruesome scene, depending on how it went down. And that's a struggle I know we both have.
Well,
trying to be normal.
Well, and that's going to be, just kind of a heads up. That's going to be kind of the theme of this episode is guys who've decided to check out. They've decided to end their life, and they honestly they've lost a war.
Yeah.
So that's just give you a heads up. That's where this episode's going to go. So again, if you're up for it, hang on. I think it'll be beneficial for you. But if you're not there right now, then hit pause and come back to it later.
Right. And look, it's going to get dark before it gets light in your situation and in this conversation. And that's why we titled this episode "Goodbye, Friend."
Yeah, it's goodbye, my friend.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's we'll start off. My one of the issues that I had is, or that I've noticed in the different people that we've had, and they honestly served as a driving force for us with this podcast. That was definitely we didn't sit down and say, hey, let's have let's start doing a podcast and talk about each other's feelings. It was like, hey man, look, we're getting these phone calls a lot more often than what we would like, and so it was.
And the thing that we noted was it wasn't the phone call from your friend saying, man, I'm in a low spot and I need help. It was a phone call from another friend saying, hey, so-and-so's checked out today.
Well, and that's what happened to me years ago, with a guy that we worked with together where, and for the sake of their families and to give them respect, we're not going to use their names.
Right.
But I remember I was working in, it was right after a hurricane had happened, and I was doing some construction. I was at a friend's house, I was at a friend's house working on it because he had a tree fall through his house and everything. And everybody's got, if you've never experienced the aftermath of a hurricane in South Louisiana or Florida or whatever, it is a time where everybody's stressed out. You're at your wit's end, even if you're the best person in the world. Power's not out, or I'm sorry, the power is out. So a lot of people don't have running water. They don't, which means they're not taking showers. And God knows we could all use a shower. If you don't think you can use a bath, come to South Louisiana in the middle of August.
Right, spend 20 minutes outside.
95 degrees outside, and you got sweat all the way down to your toes. And tell me you don't need a bath after that. But so you've got that going on. A lot of people with electric stoves and stuff like that, they can't cook. They, so they're eating cold sandwiches, and nobody likes a cold sandwich, not even Jimmy John's.
Right.
And so it's one of those where people's houses are destroyed, or maybe not they're destroyed. They're damaged to the extent where, hey, I don't have 40 grand sitting in my bank account to go do this on my own. I've got to now deal with the insurance company, and that's always, that's like Christmas time dealing with an insurance company.
Oh, goodness.
It's like if you ever want to pull your teeth out, then deal with an insurance company. But
if you know me, you know I don't ever want to pull my teeth out.
So it's one of those things where everybody was at their, everybody's stressed out, overworked, they're tired, they're not sleeping, they're just they're at their wits' end.
Right.
And I think it was you that gave me a call and said, hey, so and so, just want to give you a heads up. He ended his life this morning.
Right. Checked
and,
out.
And I didn't have a big dramatic, phone falling to the ground or anything like that because, unfortunately we've been exposed to it too much. And that was not the first time I've received a phone call like that. But it made me, kind of step back for a minute. I will give him that, because he meant a lot to me.
Right.
And I think he was legit one of the few guys that you see in the world who, when they say, hey, you can't really say anything bad about this person, he was that type of guy.
Yeah. Dedicated to his family.
Whether he knew you for a day or a year or 10 years, he was just as nice and cordial with you, as if y'all were friends your entire life.
Well, it's funny is that you bring it up because he was a guy that we had run into. He was in law enforcement, and he'd gone on to other things afterwards, but was still tied really closely with law enforcement. And we had run into a guy that he had just had to manhandle. It was a circumstance. It had gotten kind of violent, and him and that guy were still friends to that day that I'd been introduced to.
Because that's how he carried himself.
Because that's who he was. He was a charismatic. He was happy and go lucky to everybody. I'd never heard anybody say a bad word about it, and that's what threw me off about the whole situation is that was not the guy that you saw doing anything like that.
You never would have expected it. And he was the one that made me change my view. Because he's the one where prior to that it was, hey, they're weak. They had or they had a moment of weakness. Or whatever. For him, it was like, no, there's obviously something else going on. Because I remember he was real pivotal for me in my early law enforcement career, and I remember the conversation that me and him had where I'm like, okay, he's not this guy who's struggling with or scared or anything like that. Like he was a very strong dude, or he appeared to be a very mentally strong guy.
Hands on, and he knew if you were brand new, how to break that mentality of, oh, gross, I don't want to be a part of any of this. No.
So, it was, for me, that changed my mentality on how I looked at it, where it's like, okay, maybe I was young or naive whenever I thought what I was thinking. And so now it's somebody who's close, and, maybe I was wrong. And so that changed my mindset there, where it's like, okay, it didn't carry the stigma that had grown up. Because as well as I do, it's when you start talking about, people who in their lives, everybody who gets that phone call, you initially have that reaction of man, I wish I could have done something. I didn't know that was going to happen. And you attach a stigma to it where it's like, okay, well, then there's nothing I can do. You feel helpless when you get that phone call, and so anytime you hear that theme, then that's the same mindset you have. Is okay, there's nothing I can do. It is what it is. And that becomes where we get the phrase, the mental battle is only when you fight alone, is because those people who make that decision are alone. Not one has ever done it surrounded by family that I've been around. Now I've had it where
I did have that one, but that was
I had one where it was they separated themselves from their family. They made it where they were alone because they didn't want their family to be in that situation. But there's an isolation mechanism that takes place, and when you start looking at it,
cutting yourself off,
and that is what happens with a lot of guys. Whether from the first instance of stress in our life, we'd rather not talk about it, and we'd rather not discuss different things with our friends or whatever, because hey, you don't want to be the Debbie Downer at the party, you don't want to go to the barbecue and and start boohooing on the pulled pork.
And you don't want it 6 months later to come back up where they're like, hey, how you doing? You still
struggling?
That time
you're a big wuss,
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, isolation is a key element in it. But I think there's so much more to this, but we don't discuss it because it is a sensitive topic for somebody. Because unfortunately, like we were talking about, where hey, you look at it one way, where it's like, okay, you have a misconception of what it really is because you haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
You have those guys who, these are just weak people, and then you have the other people who's experienced it, where they're heartbroken because that's a loved one, or or something like that, and you can't. Unfortunately, the way we have it set up now is we've got to find a way to bridge that gap between those two groups of people.
See, and when I got the call about him, my brain, I mean, I had the same thoughts you did, but my brain went a different direction because it wasn't a what could I have done differently. Him and I weren't on that communicative level to where I could have texted or I could have called. Like, it would have been out of the normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized then that I don't have the communicative skill set to intentionally talk to my people.
Right.
Like yesterday, it was a bizarre day. I don't think we talked at all yesterday outside of once we got off of work. And it did not dawn on me until that evening that we had not talked all day.
Right.
And like, it dialed me back into, because so if you guys are watching and you don't understand, Mike and I, we choose a topic, we spend the week kind of going over how we're going to do it. We don't script anything. We don't, we have a very loose structure, but we spend that week trying to get our heads wrapped around the topic. So this last week has been really dark for me because I knew we were going to go down this road, and I wanted to get in that frame of mind. And I realized last night that I don't take the correct friend standpoint with a lot of our friends and take that effort to reach out. And I've slowly been starting to curb that and change it to be a better friend, for lack of terms. So, like, for example, like, now I go out of my way to, in the most awkward ways possible, tell you I love you, because in the true sense of the word, I know that I'd be lost if I lost you in any kind of way, because you are the balance in my my life sometimes. And so
I don't know if you could hear my eyes rolling.
Oh, I did. That's why I gave the camera a smile and wink. So in that regard, we as men, we've got to break that line. We've got to break the stigma. We've got to start checking on our friends, because at the end of it, when you get that phone call, there's nothing you can do at that point.
Right.
They checked out. Their war's over. You can't be, support in the war for them if you never made the effort to be the support. And they don't know they have support, because we as men, we're not reaching out. We're not checking those boxes. We're not, waking up in the morning. Like, and I tie it into the dating world, right? If back in my heyday, I had probably 10 women that I would message on a regular basis. I'm bragging a little bit. Maybe I'm lying. We don't know. But I would make sure when I woke up,
we know you're lying.
Copy and paste that message, send it to those ladies, and be like, boop, good morning, beautiful, because that's what you ladies like to hear. So send that message, but how often do we do that to our friends? How often are we checking on your boy?
So I think I have an answer for you on that one, but I don't think it's your stereotypical answer. I think a lot of it is we are scared of having that conversation with our friends.
Yeah.
Because we're not as mentally strong as we think we are.
Right, or emotionally inept to connect.
And what I mean by that is, 22-year-old Mike would not have had a conversation with anybody about suicide. I hadn't experienced any of those.
I hate when you make a mistake and I have to edit it.
Yeah. So, I hadn't experienced life that had put me at that point. Granted, up to that point, my life was not perfect, but it also wasn't bad. Like, my dad did a really good job of keeping me from a lot of trauma. I had stress, just like everybody else does, going through college and working 2 jobs through college and stuff like that. But, and death of family members, death of friends, things like that. So life happened, but it wasn't, I don't remember having the battle going on there.
Right. Trying to understand that darkness,
yeah. I was also very immature at that stage of my life, know, and we all, when you're 25 years old and you look back at your 15-year-old self, you look at how dumb you were. You know,
Right,
that's all you see. You know, and when you're 35, you look back at your 25-year-old self, and you're like, wow, that guy was dumb too. And so, I can only imagine. I haven't made it to 45 yet, but I can imagine when I'm 45 and look back at 35, like, wow, that guy was dumb.
Right.